Nearly half of our planet is turning to desert, swallowing farms, villages, and futures. Nowhere is this happening faster than Kubuqi, a land once dense with rivers and grass, now crushed by dunes taller than skyscrapers. The world's best scientists and massive government programs failed for decades. So when a poor teacher unleashed 4.5 million rabbits, aiming to turn dead sand green, it sounded like madness. How did a forbidden experiment in China become a global model worth $10 billion while the rest of the world still struggles? This is where the story and the stakes truly begin. Across continents, deserts are not just growing, they are swallowing the land beneath our feet. According to the United Nations, up to 41% of Earth's surface is now classified as dry land, degraded, or at serious risk of desertification. That means nearly half the world's land is losing the battle against drought, wind, and sand. More than 40% of what remains is under threat. With billions of people living in regions where crops fail, water dries up, and dust storms force families to flee their homes, the scale is almost unimaginable. Every year, millions of acres of once productive soil turn to dust, pushing migration, hunger, and poverty in their wake. This is not just a problem for one country or one continent. From the Sahel in Africa to the grasslands of Central Asia, from southern Europe to the American Southwest, the same story repeats. Land that once fed villages now lies barren, stripped of life by relentless sun and wind. The crisis touches every corner of the globe, and the numbers keep rising. But while most efforts have struggled to slow the tide, there is one place where the desert's advance was not only halted, but reversed. In northern China, a region once written off as lost has become a living challenge to the idea that deserts are forever. The story of Kubuqi stands as proof that even on a planet facing a dry land emergency, hope can take root in the unlikeliest of places. The Kubuqi Desert stretches across more than 7,000 square miles in Inner Mongolia, a vast expanse of shifting sand nearly the size of Massachusetts. For generations, families carved out a living here, tending crops and raising livestock on grasslands that once rolled toward the horizon. But year after year, the land changed. The fierce winds scoured the surface, stripping away soil and carrying it east. The dunes, once distant, began to move. Some rose as high as multi-story buildings, their crests reshaped by every storm. Villages disappeared beneath the sand, roads vanished, and rivers dried to memory. Over decades, thousands of acres of farmland were buried, and the desert's edge crept ever closer to the last remaining settlements. Entire communities packed up what little they could save and left, forced out by the relentless advance of sand. The air filled with dust so thick that daylight seemed to vanish. In the heart of Kubuqi, life itself was fading. The land that once fed families now offered nothing but silence and emptiness. With every lost field and abandoned home, the crisis deepened, leaving behind a landscape that appeared beyond hope, a place where survival seemed impossible, and the desert itself became the enemy. In the decades after the land began to fail, China threw everything it could at the spreading sands. In the 1950s and the 1960s, the government launched sweeping campaigns to reclaim the desert's edge. Teams of workers planted long lines of windbreak forests across the north, hoping rows of poplars and willows could slow the relentless wind. Grazing bans spread across the region, forcing herders to keep their flocks away from fragile grasslands. Deep wells were drilled in search of water, and sand barriers were built to hold the dunes in place. The ambition was enormous, but the desert proved stubborn. Imported tree species withered in dry, salty ground. Without local roots, many saplings died within seasons. Windbreaks broke down, and the sand rolled over them. Grazing bans, though well-intentioned, left many families struggling to survive, and some ignored the rules just to get by. Wells often ran dry, and the cost of pumping water soared far beyond what villagers could afford. For every patch of green that took hold, acres more slipped away. The sand kept advancing, swallowing the hard work of thousands. Yet the effort never stopped. Year after year, new plans were drawn, new forests planted, new wells dug. Each failure was met with another attempt, driven by the conviction that the land could not be abandoned. But by the late 20th century, it was clear that something different was needed. The old methods could slow the desert, but they could not turn it back. The door was open for a new kind of thinking, one that would look beyond brute force and search for a way to work with the land itself. In 1988, the Kubuqi Desert pressed in on all sides, threatening to erase the last traces of human effort. Roads vanished beneath dunes. Salt trucks sat stranded, engines choked by sand. The salt works, once the economic heart of the area, teetered on the brink. For Wang Wenbiao, newly appointed head of the factory and a former teacher who had grown up in the region, the crisis was personal. Hundreds of families depended on the salt works for survival. As creditors circled and profits disappeared, Wang faced a choice: abandon the business or confront the desert head-on. He chose the latter, staking his future on a simple but radical idea. For every ton of salt sold, he set aside 5 yuan as a self-imposed planting levy. There were no outside investors, no government bailouts. The fund grew slowly, one shipment at a time. Wang rallied his staff, asking them to plant trees during the off-season. They worked with shovels, buckets, and bare hands, planting saplings along the factory's edge. The aim was immediate: build a living barrier to hold back the advancing sands, protect the salt lake, and keep the business afloat long enough to plan for something bigger. Skepticism ran deep. Many saw the effort as futile, convinced the desert would swallow the trees as it had everything else. But as the first windbreaks took root, the sand near the factory began to settle. Salt production stabilized. A thin ring of green appeared where there had only been dust. For the first time in years, the salt works posted a modest profit. Instead of retreating, Wang reinvested every yuan. He expanded the planting fund, brought in more local families, and experimented with different tree species. He studied the desert's patterns, learning from each setback. Wang's ambitions grew with each season. He set a target that seemed almost impossible: to reclaim 1,400 square miles of desert. He borrowed against the future, risking his own home as collateral when banks hesitated. He promised workers a share of any future profits, turning the salt works into a community effort. Every sapling became a small act of resistance. Every patch of green, a sign that the desert could be pushed back. The internal planting levy became the backbone of this fight. It funded experiments, paid workers, and built trust among local families. It also marked a shift. The desert would be challenged, not with desperation, but with business sense and shared sacrifice. In the heart of the Kubuqi, hope began to take root, anchored by a teacher's vow and a community's refusal to surrender. What started as a last stand for a struggling factory set the stage for a new phase in the battle against the desert. On the edge of the Kubuqi Desert, a new kind of partnership took root, one that relied not on machines or chemicals, but on the quiet work of willows and rabbits. Wang Wenbiao and the local farmers looked beyond brute force, searching for a way to turn barren sand into living soil. They found their answer in a closed loop that mimicked nature's own cycles, linking trees, animals, and earth in a single, self-sustaining system. The first step was the willow. Hardy and drought-resistant, willows could survive where almost nothing else could. Their roots reached deep into the sand, anchoring dunes and drawing up what little moisture lay hidden below. Over the years, Wang's teams planted millions, by some local accounts more than 300 million willows, across the shifting landscape. Each tree was a living barrier, slowing the wind, trapping dust, and shading the ground. But willows alone were not enough. The sand still lacked the one thing real soil needs: organic matter. That's where the rabbits came in. Wang introduced Rex rabbits, a breed known for their resilience and rapid reproduction. Unlike livestock that require abundant water and pasture, Rex rabbits thrive on dry grass and willow shoots. They can withstand desert winters and multiply quickly, offering families a new source of income. But their real gift lay in their droppings. Rabbit manure is rich in nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, the very nutrients missing from desert sand. Each pellet is a tiny package of fertilizer, and because rabbits cannot digest many seeds, their manure naturally spreads new life across the dunes. Farmers soon noticed the change. Where rabbits grazed and willows grew, the sand began to darken. Manure mixed with fallen leaves, building up rich, brown humus. Project reports claim that each acre in this system can yield over 5 tons of organic matter every year. Within just a few years, what had been sterile sand could hold water, support crops, and resist the wind. The willow-rabbit loop turned a vicious cycle of loss into a virtuous one. Trees fed rabbits, rabbits fed the soil, and the soil fed new trees. Nothing was wasted. Every element served more than one purpose, and every family involved had a direct stake in the land's recovery. This was not a miracle of luck or a gamble with nature. It was careful engineering, rooted in observation and patience. By working with the land's limits instead of fighting them, Wang and his neighbors created a system that brought prosperity as well as hope. The desert, once an enemy, became a partner. In the process, a new kind of wealth began to grow, not just in harvests and pelts, but in the promise that even the harshest places can be made to bloom. Vast stretches of sand once defined the heart of Kubuqi, but today satellite images reveal a different story. What was once a barren expanse now glows with swaths of green, covering 1,200 square miles that had been lifeless for decades. On the ground, the change is impossible to ignore. In areas where sandstorms once raged unchecked, the air is calmer, wind speeds have dropped, and the dunes no longer march across the land. Measurements show that more than 15 million tons of sand are now held in place each year by the roots of willows and the humus built by rabbit manure. The soil, once dry and powdery, is rich and dark, able to hold water and support new life. In places where wells had long run dry, groundwater levels have risen by as much as 6.5 feet over 20 years. Farmers who once watched their fields vanish beneath the dunes now draw water at half the depth they needed before. Wildlife, too, has returned. Deer, foxes, and birds find shelter among the willows, and native grasses push up through soil that was once only dust. The transformation is visible from space, but its real impact is felt in every inch of land that has been brought back from the edge. Here, the landscape itself stands as proof that even the harshest desert can be made to bloom. Sunlight once bounced off endless dunes, but in Kubuqi, it now powers a new kind of wealth. Engineers mapped out nearly 200,000 solar panels, an array shaped like a galloping horse, visible even from space. This is the Junma Solar Farm, built on land that was once considered hopeless. The panels stretch across stabilized sand, capturing enough energy each year to supply hundreds of millions of kilowatt hours to the grid. In practical terms, that is clean electricity for a city the size of Miami, all produced where nothing but wind and dust ruled before. But the impact runs deeper than energy. The panels cast shade, slowing evaporation and creating pockets of moisture where grasses and wildflowers can take hold. Underneath, sheep and rabbits graze, keeping the land healthy and doubling as natural lawnmowers. Local families tend both panels and pastures, earning steady wages where there was only poverty a decade ago. The Junma project became a symbol of a new green economy, one that links technology, ecology, and community. Over the past 10 years, the combined force of solar power, restored land, and sustainable industries has generated more than $10 billion in economic value. More than 10,000 families have moved out of poverty, building new lives on ground that once drove them away. In Kubuqi, prosperity grows from both the sun and the sand, showing that economic hope and environmental healing can go hand in hand. In 2011, the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification recognized Kubuqi as a global model for reversing land degradation, a rare honor given to only a handful of sites worldwide. The world's attention turned to Inner Mongolia, where willows, rabbits, and solar panels had restored life to one of the harshest deserts on Earth. Delegations arrived from Africa, the Middle East, and Southern Europe, searching for answers they could bring home to their own threatened lands. But as Kubuqi's story spread, a note of caution traveled with it. History offered a stark warning from the other side of the planet. In the mid-1800s, just 24 European rabbits were released into the wilds of Australia. Within 50 years, that small number multiplied into more than 1 billion, stripping grasslands bare and turning vast stretches of fertile country into dust. That Australian disaster showed what happens when a single solution is unleashed without careful planning or control. In contrast, Kubuqi relied on strict management. Rabbits were raised only within closed systems, every element serving a purpose, every risk weighed. The approach combined community stewardship, deliberate design, and continuous oversight. The lesson was clear: restoration demands not just hope and effort, but responsibility. The world saw in Kubuqi both a miracle and a reminder that working with nature requires humility as well as ambition. Today, nearly half our planet faces desertification, but Kubuqi stands as living proof that even the harshest lands can be reborn. As global droughts worsen, the world looks to solutions born from courage and creativity, not just technology. The lesson is clear: transformation starts where hope refuses to die. What will we choose to restore next? Share your thoughts below.